Going. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. We're really excited to have you here today. Our goal is to introduce you to Tech Plus, but more importantly, we want you to leave here thinking differently about how we measure progress and impact in business coaching. So that is our goal here today, and we're really excited that you're here to join us. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. If you're not speaking, we please ask you to keep yourself muted. It really helps minimize background noise, makes it easier for everyone else to hear. And we absolutely welcome questions throughout the session, so feel free to drop them in the chat at any time. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat and we'll answer questions as we go, right in the chat or at the end during our Q&A. So don't worry, we'll try to get through all those questions. Today's webinar is also being recorded, and we'll send the recording to everyone who registered, so don't worry if you missed something or want to revisit any content that was discussed later, or to share this video with anyone that could not attend. We do encourage that as well. And finally, we'll be respectful of everyone's time by starting and ending as scheduled. Thanks again for being here, and we're excited for you to join us. Let's start with a little bit of grounding. We'd love to learn a little bit about who's joining us today. So please introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name, organization, and the state you're joining from. It's really, honestly, always great to see a range of organizations represented and helps us tailor today's discussion. So we'll give a few seconds there for you all to add some of that information. And while you're doing that, for those of you who are new to Opportunities Exchange, we welcome you. Our mission is to transform the business of early childhood and education so programs can financially be sustainable while providing high quality experiences for children and families. And we support this work through shared services, business automation, technology, coaching, and data-informed decision making. If you don't know me, I am Joanna Borden, and I'll be co-facilitating today's session with Amy Freelander, which you'll hear from a little later during this presentation. Our work recently has been focused on helping states, intermediaries, coaches, and technology partners implement the Tech Plus framework. So today's webinar will do an introduction of Tech Plus. We'll explore what Tech Plus is, the core components of the framework, how technology, coaching, and data work together, the Tech Plus assessments and milestones, which are a key component to the framework, and why measuring business transformation is not just an activity, it's truly an essential piece of the work. One of the key ideas we'll focus on is the difference between what we talk about around technology adoption and technology implementation. So technology adoption to us means a program has the software and is using it. Implementation is about whether the technology is really strengthening business practices and improving their financial management, their enrollment, staffing, and decision making. So today, the gap, we hope to share what Tech Plus can do, and that the gap that we see is why Tech Plus was designed, and hopefully shows how it's bridging that work. Technology to us is the tool, but coaching really builds the capacity to use it effectively. And Tech Plus provides a consistent way to measure whether those efforts are leading to meaningful and those sustainable businesses that we want to ensure happen. So I'm just going to pop into the chat really quick. I see so many of you all from different areas, and I'm really, really excited to have all you here today. Again, there'll be time for question and answer at the end, so feel free to add those to the chat, and welcome. So let's get started. So now that we've introduced today's session, I'd like to start with a quick poll. So we're going to go right into a little bit of interaction. Whether you're a coach or a state leader, an intermediary, a technology partner, or a funder, we all know supporting childcare businesses come with challenges, so we'd like to hear from you. The first poll is, in your experience, what is the biggest challenge in business coaching? So go ahead. I see you all starting to select the options that best fit your experience. Is it measuring coaching impact, recruiting and retaining quality coaches, providing technology adoption and CCMS use, provider engagement, internal challenges in the EC ecosystem. All right, provider engagement is up there right now. Wonderful. Everyone answered the poll question. I love that. So looking at the results, it's clear that there are different perspectives, right, in the room, and that's exactly what we expected. We do see that provider engagement is 55% of, I hope you can see the poll. Let me share it. There you go. And it's 55% of what you all feel is the biggest challenge in business coaching, alongside the measuring coaching impact, which we'll hear a lot about about that today and in the following webinars that we have scheduled. And then provider tech adoption and CCMS use, external challenges in the EC ecosystem. So we really hope to address a lot of those challenges in either this session or the sessions that follow. So thank you so much for participating. So the next piece is really the foundation of the Tech Plus framework. When people first hear the name Tech Plus, they often assume that it's a framework about technology. That's what we've been hearing. So I just wanted to kind of state that. But it's actually about something much bigger. Technology is one piece, business practices are another, data is another, and coaching brings those pieces really together. We see Tech Plus as sitting at the intersection of all these components. The goal isn't simply to help providers adopt the technology, it's to help them use technology supported by coaching and informed by data to really strengthen how they operate their businesses and achieve measurable, sustainable outcomes. So you'll hear me say that a lot during this session. As you look at the slide, think of it less as a series of steps and more as a formula. None of these components are enough on their own. A provider can have great software, but still struggle with budgeting or enrollment. They can have access to a lot of data, but not know how to use it. And they can also receive coaching without having meaningful information to guide those conversations. It's when those elements work together that real business transformation happens. So looking at this visual, because I think it's a really great way to show you the Tech Plus approach. Starting on the left with technology. Technology typically is a chakra management software. It's the foundation, operational foundation. It streamlines everyday tasks like enrollment, billing, attendance, family communication, reporting. But simply using CCMS doesn't automatically improve business. We've seen that. Technology is the tool, but not the outcome. So business best practices is where it needs to go next. Technology is most valuable when supporting those strong operational businesses. Like I shared, those financial management, enrollment, cash flow. And then there's data, data for decision making, using the data to understand the performance and guides the action. That's really the most important part of that data, having data for decisions. And then the coaching, not only as an individual program and provider, but as small group coaching to support and build skills and solve those challenges and those pain points that we hear providers having all the time, and to drive growth. And then at the end of it all is being able to measure those outcomes. So achieving those results that improve sustainable and quality programs. And Tech Plus does a great job of integrating technology, business practices, data, and coaching into one framework that really moves to driving these measurable outcomes. So now that you've seen the framework, the next question is what makes Tech Plus different from other business coaching models? So we see it in these three things that really set it apart: consistency, flexibility, impact. Starting with consistency, every coach brings their own experience and coaching style. And within the poll, that was really, it was evident that getting programs to buy into the coaching and be supported by coaching is really important. And that with having consistency and having every coach bring their own experience and coaching style, and that's a strength, but it also makes it a little difficult to provide consistent experience and compare outcomes across the coaches and organizations and even, states. So Tech Plus creates consistency by providing a common framework. What we say as a shared language or standardized tool, it doesn't tell coaches how to coach. It gives them a consistent way to assess progress, prioritize goals, and measure change. And coaching really remains relationship based while becoming more structured and measurable. But just as important as the consistency doesn't mean a one size fits all approach. Tech Plus is intentionally flexible. It's vendor neutral, and can be adopted across different states, organization, and coaching models and childcare management software. Whether you're supporting a family childcare home, a center, a shared service alliance, a CCRNR, or a statewide initiative, the framework really provides that common foundation while allowing the implementation to fit that local context. So I think it's a really great framework to show flexibility across what we understand the ECE ecosystem is like. Ultimately, it all leads to impact. The goal isn't simply to complete coaching sessions or increase software usage. It's to help providers strengthen their business practices in measurable, sustainable ways. Tech Plus gives those coaches and organizations really a way to demonstrate not just what they did, but what actually changed because of coaching. And we see that a lot in data. We see a lot of data that tells us what they did, but is it actually showing what changed because of the coaching? When you bring these three elements together, consistency, flexibility, and impact, you have a framework that we believe is practical, that it's scalable, and it's designed to strengthen those business coaching while really measuring meaningful business transformation, which is where we want to go with this. And that leads to one of kind of my favorite aspects of Tech Plus. It's not just designed for coaches, it's really designed to strengthen the entire childcare ecosystem. Talking about designing the childcare ecosystem, one of the things that makes Tech Plus unique is that it recognizes providers don't operate in isolation. We know that they're supported by an entire network of organizations, each which we know plays such a different role, but is as equally important in helping the childcare business succeed. So Tech Plus intentionally was designed so everyone can work from the same framework while contributing in different ways. So states can align policy, funding, business support efforts. Intermediaries and CCRNRs and shared service alliances can support coaches and monitor progress and measure outcomes using a common approach. And then our technology partners, who play also a huge role in this, can build features and dashboards and data tools that strengthen business coaching and help providers make those informed decisions. Although we know that each partner has a different role, they're all working towards the same goal: stronger business practices, driving childcare programs, and better outcomes for children and families. That's why you can say that Tech Plus isn't just a coaching framework, it's an ecosystem framework. It can provide a shared language, a common way for partners and to support providers and measure success. So with that in mind, I talked a lot through these slides. So with that in mind, I want to challenge one of the most common assumptions we hear about technology and business coaching, and I want you to think through this next slide with me. So as I shared, I've talked about what makes Tech Plus different and how it supports the entire childcare ecosystem. But I want to challenge this common assumption we hear about technology and business coaching. So take a look at the statement on the screen. If a provider uses their CCMS every day, they are successfully implementing technology. What do you think? Is this a myth or a reality? Take a moment to think about it. You can even, if you feel brave, drop it in the chat. Is it a myth or a reality? It's funny when we've asked this question or when I've posted something similar, we usually get mixed responses to this question because on the surface, it could sound like it could be true. Or if someone's logging into CCMS every day, attending coaching sessions and completing their tasks, it seems like they're making progress. So do we think it's reality? Do we think it's myth? Well, the way I'm going to frame it is that it is reality, but that technology adoption alone doesn't improve outcomes. So a little trick there. And that's one of the biggest mindset shifts in Tech Plus framework. Technology is the tool. Chakra management system software can streamline enrollment, billing, attendance, and reporting, but technology alone doesn't change how business operates. And I know that there's some people here on this webinar that have been doing a lot of this work and know that is so true that when coaching really makes the difference. Coaching helps providers build the knowledge and confidence to use technology intentionally, really turning that information into action. And that's where we think Tech Plus is so valuable here. Together, we know that technology and coaching lead to stronger business practices. Heard me say this, better financial management, improved enrollment, stronger staffing, and really those, decision-making informed data sets that we could potentially have with really successful implementation. So that's what Tech Plus measures. We're not asking, did the provider use the software? We're asking, how did the technology was supported by coaching and strengthening that provider's business. So why we say activity tells us what providers did, Tech Plus tells us what it changed. And that's why, I'm so excited to be introducing this to you all because it really does measure what was changed for that program. So how does that happen in practice? Tech Plus gives coaches a structured process to really assess where program providers are, identify their priorities, and measure meaningful progress over time. We do this, and we'll get into, if you have signed up for any of our other webinars, we'll get into really the nitty-gritty of some of the tools that we'll introduce in this session. But it really does help identify those priorities and measure those meaningful progress over time using goal setting. Smart goal setting. So before we look at how the framework works in practice in that next slide, I'd like to get your perspective. I'm going to launch a second poll, so bear with me really quickly. I believe you should see the poll on your screen. So in your opinion, which is the best indicator that coaching has been successful? Did the provider complete all the assigned tasks? Did the provider self-report data improve from baseline to program completion? Did the provider actively use their CCMS? Did the provider implement sustainable business practices? Did the provider meet regularly with the coach? I'll give you, again, a few seconds to respond here. I'll say that these are all valuable measures, so there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm curious which one rises to the top in this poll for you. Okay, I'll give it one more second. There's a few more responses, and then I will share the results. All right. So I hope you can see the results. What came up the highest percentage is the provider implemented sustainable business practices. Yay. That's exactly a good segue into the next slide because that's what Tech Plus can support is showing the progress and the implementation of those business practices by following the milestone scale, which again we'll dig into as we go through this session and in the sessions to come. So thank you for participating. So for this slide, we want to emphasize that every provider begins with an assessment, a pre-assessment, not to create more paperwork. I know we hear assessments and, reviews, but not to create more paperwork, but to understand where they are before deciding where to go. It's really important to set the stage, to have a pre-assessment, to understand where providers are and see where they're moving to next. So think of it like a GPS. Before you can determine the best route, right, you need to know your starting point. The process begins with understanding the provider's current business operations. That is the first step that you will take with the Tech Plus framework. And then coaches review key documents, talk with the provider, and when appropriate, begin to assess how they're using the childcare management software. The goal is to understand their strengths, challenges, and business context. After that, the coaches use two standardized Tech Plus assessment tools to establish a baseline. One that we call the building blocks. These the building blocks document and standardized assessment assesses where foundational business systems are in place, while the milestone scale then measures how consistently key business practices are being implemented. So is that business practice in use? Is that business practice not in use? And what evidence and information can you collect using the building blocks to assess where they are at a foundational level? So using those results, the coach and provider identify up to 3 priority SMART goals, recommend that those priority SMART goals are, kind of co-created with the program. What's their priority? Where do we see the need is for business practice support? And then moving forward from there, rather than just trying to improve everything at once, which we know can be really stressful for not just the coach, but the program, it really focuses on changing that will have the greatest impact in the business and help you with that relationship building and that buy-in, which we learned early on in the poll. As coaching continues, progress is documented through the goal setting, and then assessments are revisited to measure growth over time. So then there's a post-assessment to be able to measure growth over time. And the in-between, that progress and documentation of progress and review of progress is done through this SMART goal setting. So throughout the process, 3 principles remain. Tech Plus is data-informed, provider-driven, and result-focused. It provides a consistent framework that will allow coaching to be tailored to each provider's unique needs because you're selecting goals and milestones that really support where the provider is, what their needs are at the moment. And the great thing about the Tech Plus framework is that it can shift, right? We talked about flexibility earlier. It can shift. If there's a shift in priority for that program, then there could be a shift in coaching, a shift in goal setting, a shift in milestone selection. So, keeping that at the forefront as well is that it is a flexible framework. So I said a lot, but what exactly are coaches assessing? Tech Plus answers that with those 2 complementary tools that I had mentioned that they work together to provide kind of that comprehensive picture of the provider's business. So at the heart of the framework, these 2 assessment tools help coaches understand a provider's current business practice and then being able to measure it over time. So first, the Tech Plus building blocks. Think of it, as I shared, think of this as a foundation. It's a document, it's a checklist, but it helps determine whether the key systems, policies, and operational documents are in place. It gives you a structure of what to ask for and assess for that program to determine if they're really utilizing that business practice or meeting that milestone and they have that best practice in their business. For example, one of the milestones is around a parent handbook. So we know that just having a parent handbook is not enough, but having a parent handbook with certain documents in there is what we're thriving for. We're looking at the parent handbook and we're determining, is this best practice, and helping programs meet that goal. The second is the Tech Plus milestones. This goes beyond asking whether something exists to measuring how consistently business practices are being implemented. I will say it includes 86 business practices across 5 core business domains. I know it sounds overwhelming. I'll explain. Together, these tools provide a complete picture. The building blocks tell us what a provider has, while the milestones tell us what they're doing. So both of these tools are really organized around those 5 business domains, which are enrollment, revenue, cash flow, human resource, and data. These areas are interconnected, so giving coaches a way to look at the whole business rather than focusing on one area at a time. So I will say, if you remember one thing about this slide is not those 86 business practices, but that there's 2 tools. There's 5 business domains and 1 goal. Really, like I've been saying, stronger and more sustainable childcare businesses. So let's take a closer look at the milestone scale at a high level. So I said that there are 86 business practices, but they are broken down in those 5 domains. We hear, one question we hear often is why 86 business practices? At first glance, I know it sounds overwhelming, but look at these not as 86 tasks that providers are expected to complete, but they're a coaching framework designed to guide growth over time. So the milestone scale is organized in these 3 developmental levels. You can see on the screen there's foundational, which is really establishing those systems, that I can do this approach for a program. Then the proficient is about consistently applying those systems. So I can do it consistently, right? An example to that is, am I using attendance in a childcare management software? I can do it. I'm doing it at a foundational level, but am I doing it consistently? Am I taking attendance daily? Am I reviewing my attendance? Am I ensuring families are signing in and out, etc.? So this is often where coaching has what we believe the greatest impact by helping providers build really those sustainable habits. And then you have the expert level. It's about using data to evaluate, refine, and continuously improve their business practices. So not going from the I can do it consistently to I improve my business. So again, thinking about it rather than kind of checking these boxes. The milestones help coaches identify where a provider is today. With that pre-assessment, determine the next logical steps to set those SMART goals, and then measure those goals to show progress over time. They also provide value beyond kind of the individual coaching because they're organized by business domains and levels. Organizations can aggregate data in very different ways. You can identify trends. Maybe you can look at how many foundational milestones were met in the first 3 months of implementation. Maybe you can look at, between centers and family providers, how many homes, how many have accomplished our foundational or proficient milestones. So it really helps you identify trends, which then helps target resources and really better understand the business needs for providers across the network. So ultimately, the goal isn't to complete the 86 business practices. It's to help providers move from establishing those systems at the foundational level to implementing them consistently to continuously improving their business. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy, who will share how Tech Plus is being implemented across the country.
Thanks, Joanna. Hi, everybody. So I just have a couple of slides to share a little bit about how we understand Tech Plus is being implemented. In some cases, we're actively involved. In other cases, we are somewhat, cheerleading from the sidelines. And that may be the case with many of you. We hope that you're here because you've accessed some of the resources and you're interested in them. They are available, they are free, and Joanna's going to talk through the toolkit a little bit before we close today. But Just wanted to reiterate, as Joanna mentioned, that there's a lot of flexibility built into the framework, and we know that each of our states works very differently on different kinds of funding programs, different rates of payment, different licensing regulation, and the local landscape really makes a difference. And we fully support the idea that hopefully you all would be modifying, adapting the tools that we've created to best fit your needs and your local ECE ecosystem. We really have had an amazing opportunity in Arkansas where we have launched a pilot initiative with a partner, a local partner, doing the actual business coaching. And we've been alongside providing technical assistance to their coaches and working with an evaluator. And we're excited to be able to share some results of that. We can share results and talk about that process, but we will have some data to share at the end of the calendar year. So that's been our kind of our baby, if you will. We've also been working in Oregon, where the state used some of their PDG funding to support a small Tech Plus initiative, working with one coach. And we've had a great opportunity to provide her with some training and supports around implementation, engaging providers, finding providers that wanted to participate, and getting started in that process. It is a shorter project because of that 1 year PDG project period, which we all know is not ideal. But creatively, Oregon took those 86 milestones that Joanna just mentioned and said, well, we've got to prioritize. And they selected 43 that were most important for them. And that's what the coach and her participants are really focused on together. We have our friends in Indiana, and I believe Danielle is on the call today, who said, we've worked with Opportunities Exchange a bunch over the years, been in different settings, different employers, if you will, different projects, but we're really interested in Tech Plus. We're gonna start using this. And they had coaching initiatives as part of a big shared services program in a specific region of the state and have been digging in. And Danielle asks questions when she's got some and is, hopefully she'll continue to ask those questions and let us know how it's going. So far, she said it's going well. She's finding it helpful. And in Arizona, we're just kicking off a process with their team at Southwest Human Development. It's an existing kind of a mature business coaching program that has used several CCMS for several years. And they are interested, and we've got a consultation contract with them to really think through with their leadership which pieces of Tech Plus they want to pull into their program, how, etc. So those are some of the pieces that are happening, and I just wanted to set those up as we think you're here because you're interested in using the tools, and just want to share those initial ideas of what we hear in the field. So I see a question came in from Sarah about where did business coaching appear in the landscapes in these states? And so in Arizona, there had been an existing business coaching program. In Indiana, there had been business coaching through Spark. It was part of the quality rating improvement system that was on the ground throughout the state. That the Spark contract was abruptly defunded as part of a major shift, the ARPA funding cliff. So there had been a gap in time, but I would say the state and providers were used to the idea of business coaching. In Oregon, the state has a relationship with the CCR&Rs, and a portion of what the state funds is what they call networks, and part of the networks involves business coaching. And in Arkansas, I would say the business coaching was relatively new. There had been a lot of professional development. There had been a requirement that when you apply for a license for childcare, you have to submit a budget, but no one ever looked at those budgets, which was kind of interesting. And there was a pass and a BAS that was part of the quality rating system. So there was a team on the ground that was able to do those assessments. But again, we weren't able to access any data from those pass and BAS assessments. So there was less orientation towards business coaching, I would say, in Arkansas. Great question. Joanna, do you mind flipping to the next slide? Thanks. So that's kind of, the big picture of project implementation. And as I mentioned, lots of different ways that your project implementation might unfold. And there are lots of ways that OpEx can be supportive, or you might not need us. You might be able to use all those tools yourselves. But, training coaches, training supervisors of the coaches, adapting these tools and resources, really thinking about those partners that Joanna mentioned. It's just critical that, I think Tammy from Iowa is on the call. We have an incredible champion in Tammy at the state who is so supportive of business coaching on the ground, not just by writing really good contracts and being very specific about the metrics that she's holding that team accountable to, but also in reaching out to her partners throughout the state and saying, hey, nurse consultants, how do you want to use the CCMS data? Hey, licensing team, how can you use the CCMS data? And that kind of support really can help address the challenges we see, very real challenges in engaging providers. So big picture project implementation overview. Maybe you have an evaluator, maybe you don't, but certainly there needs to be some upfront dedicated time to thinking about what are your goals, what's your logic model, what are you really trying to accomplish? Just like Oregon said, we don't have time in 6 months to really focus on 86. Then there's what you have to do with every new program. You've got to find the right participants, whether it's the right region, whether it's the right provider type, whether it's those who have used a CCMS, those who haven't, et cetera. So bringing providers into your world and then making sure that they're meeting your criteria, whatever that might be. And then really, we know that providers are stressed for time. We all are, but especially so our provider community. What we really want to reinforce that the clearer you are about what your project is meant to accomplish, the more clear you can be with the participants around what the expectations for them are. And so a letter of understanding is something that we think is so critical. Next slide, please. I see there's a comment from Kendra saying, hey, it's not so bad. 86 isn't so bad, and we appreciate that. It's also true that I don't have all the data right in front of me from Arkansas, but I think on average, Joanna, you can correct me. I think most participants had met like 30 of the 86 at baseline. Now, they might not have met it as the coaches learned more and got to know them. Sometimes something that we thought we assessed as, oh, it's in practice, we get less sure, but by and large, it's not I mean, these providers are working, they're functioning, they're paying their staff when you meet them, so they have something on the ball already. We always appreciate your support, Kendra. Um, and from a provider's perspective, we know that it's a lot for providers to choose to participate in any program. They have so many obligations and requirements. Here they are raising their hands to participate. But it's critical to have that signed agreement. They've got to agree to share data with you. They've got to understand that you are going to be looking at their data. And if there is discomfort or confusion over that, the time to discuss it and hopefully allay those concerns is right up front. And then, as Joanna mentioned, from the what is the provider going to expect? It's some assessment, some questions. It's not that a coach sits and works through a checklist. It's much more of a conversation and getting to know one another. But that assessment process is critical. And then really starting to understand what the milestone scale means for any given provider and what a coach's perspective might be on here are some priority areas for growth and how that coach's perspective lines up with the provider's specific business goals. And then I think I've got, yeah, back to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Amy. So before we wrap up and dig into questions and answers, I'd like to highlight the Tech Plus Toolkit. If you haven't visited our webpage that houses all of the toolkit resources, I do encourage you to do so. There's a ton of tools, templates, guides, implementation resources to really support your Tech Plus journey. So if you haven't had a chance to explore, I do encourage you to do that. And if you have not yet signed up for any of our other webinars, I encourage you to do that as well. We have 3 additional webinars scheduled in this series. The next one is around coaching with the Tech Plus frameworks, but we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive around the coaching process, tools, and strategies. So you have a little bit of greater detail on those. And if you haven't registered yet, please do so. So now we'd love to hear from you as we dig into your questions and answer. The next slide is just a quick toolkit link when we share this slide deck. And then staying connected, we do have a Tech Plus newsletter that we are sending articles through and all of these webinar sessions as well. So I encourage you to subscribe to the Tech Plus newsletter just to stay in the know of what's going on. So I'll turn it over to our question and answer session.
So, Joanna, could I kick off with a couple of questions that folks have already been diligently putting in the chat? So, Courtney was asking about CCMS and, big project unfolding. CCMS is just one element of it, is the sense that I get. And I think that this idea of, all the connections to the data systems, right? We all have this dream that maybe someday there can be just one system, just one password that we all need in our personal and professional lives. We know life will never be that simple, but there are definitely some states that are doing the hard work of building data bridges so that providers can leverage the data that they put into the CCMS, but it can automatically be shared with folks who need to see it, whether it's licensing team, quality rating system, PD registry, wherever it needs, subsidy invoicing, wherever it needs to land. So we are making progress. Progress is sometimes it's hampered or slowed down by technology vendors who might not always want to connect to one another. That might be an issue. But usually this isn't a technology issue. Usually it's really people and process and trying to tick away at it at each, through each state and with all of the players. We've had some progress with CACFP recently, the food program, in that one of the food program sponsor software. So Kenya had asked a question about Tech Plus as it relates to family childcare. We know that many family childcare providers can resist participating or using a CCMS because they have to enter so much data into their food program sponsors software. And we understand that, CACFP revenue may be up to 30% of their monthly income. So it's important. Um, but, our friends in Iowa pursued the idea of, well, why can't we link the CCMS with food program sponsor software? And so one of those software companies, My Food Program, was willing to do that work. And Brightwheel and Playground both have that connection in place. So I think that those kinds of wins are happening. They are always a little bit slower and a little bit smaller than we'd like, but they are definitely out there.
And I'll just add that as we're having and getting through these wins, that the coaching helps, and having programs enter data into the chakra management system is also a great way to encourage these systems, right? The vendors, but also kind of these systems that we want to put in place to have this wonderful one size fits all one system. If the information's in there and you can see the information, it's just a better way to get leaders, states, policy leaders, all the above to see the value in a chakra management system and the data, because we've coached to that and the information's in there to be able to disseminate, to see trends and information that's very valuable.
Joanna, there was a question about data privacy and security, and it's one that we hear a lot. I know states that when money was flowing, and states had ARPA dollars that they wanted to use for CCMS licenses, they oftentimes said, well, providers aren't taking us up on our offer. We hear that providers are really worried that the state's going to be looking at their data. So we know that state hears it, even when they're trying to do the right thing by providers. Coaches may hear it, etc. So, Joanna, I know that each CCMS has their own data privacy agreement and structure, but maybe you just want to, go into those couple of different options that teams might have in terms of what kind of access they have and how they work that through with participants.
Sure. And Amy had shared information in the previous slides about the LOU. That's where we recommend, if you are doing any data sharing or you're asking for any data to be shared, that you're being very clear with providers around what that is and what that's going to look like. We working with some projects where there's no access to the actual child care management system license, so they're not seeing that day-to-day use of the child care management system, but that they're looking at data at a more aggregate high level that could potentially be de-identified depending on the view, depending on the tab that you'd like to access. Maybe you just want to look at high level, no program information, percentages, counts. That's a possibility. You can also look at information at a more aggregate level, individual by provider, still in a dashboard setting, but again, you're not seeing child information, parent information, things like that. Or it could be a project that you want to be able to see all that, and programs are comfortable with a coach being able to go into their child care management system to help them utilize the functionality that's available to them. So that's, there's options there. And what we just say is please be clear with programs around what option will be used, and that, there's options to be able to at least get programs to participate. Maybe not being able to see all the data if that's not what they're comfortable with. But yes, every child care management system has their own data privacy agreements with providers, and there's that data is stored safely.
And it's also, I'm not sure uh, where the question, at what level, right, the provider's concerns might be. I
Yeah.
know we also hear sometimes that providers are concerned about online payments and having, banking information or credit card information from parents. And, that again, the CCMS by and large use third-party vendors for, like Stripe, something that we all use when we do any shopping online. And so neither the provider nor the CCMS company itself have access to any of that information. Once it's entered in, it is the third party vendor that has that information. And so if the provider or potential participant is concerned about that element of data privacy or security, that one the CCMS also have fully covered. But these are great conversations to have and to be prepared to have because they're very real. There was a question about longitudinal studies. As I mentioned, we are just doing, we're in month 8, I guess, of our first pilot of Tech Plus. But we've had many years in the field and to think and marinate these ideas. And many of them are sort of versions of previous work that we've done. But we will have some results from that evaluation by Luminary um, at the end of the year. And Allison from Luminary Evaluation will be participating in the 4th webinar series. She'll be co-facilitating that with Joanna. So I'd encourage you to come to that. Um, we also know that we are not a research or an evaluation firm. Allison, at Luminary Evaluation may go after some, long-term study monies at some point in time, but that's not necessarily where Opportunities Exchange will spend our time. We also know that states, sites, projects will implement the tools differently. So it's unlikely that we will ever be able to have, say that we are evidence-based. And that's kind of by design, right? We want people to utilize these tools in the way that makes the most sense for their coaching program and for their providers. But the other thing I was going to say is that CCMS vendors, if you're interested in sort of research around the efficacy of CCMS use per se, those vendors often have data points because they're sales tools for them around time savings achieved with use of CCMS. And I know that for providers, for those family childcare providers who are able to benefit from the data bridge between their CCMS and their food program sponsor, I think we estimated that they saved about 60 hours of time per year through that mechanism. So I can follow up. We can make sure that information is correct. But there are a few data points that we'd be happy to share. And we're trying our best to, it's hard enough to get funding for a long-term implementation project. Like long-term nowadays feels like a year, right? Which isn't nearly enough time. So the idea of a longitudinal study seems pretty lofty at the moment, but we'll see.
Mhm.
Yeah, we will have the chat. We will have a couple of follow-up items. Joanna, I don't know if you want to talk about the newsletter a little bit. I see
Yeah.
there was some sign up questions, etc.
Yeah, I was gonna lead there as well, Amy. So thank you. Yeah, we're hoping to have, once we have some of these pilot projects that are closing up, ending, we hope to have a few newsletters that are focused on kind of results from those projects. So again, please, I think Meredith put the link in the chat. Please sign up for the newsletter because that will be something as we continue to have this conversation around this tool and this framework. We'll be sharing as much data as we can to really show the impact that's been having on some of these projects.
Did anyone have a question that was just felt like too much or too difficult to word to put in the chat? If you can feel free to come off mute and ask. We've got a couple of minutes. Attendance. We have attendance through Zoom, Ingrid, so thank you. That's not a problem. And I think Meredith, reiterated that we will share, and Joanna too, will share the recordings, we'll share oh, here, Ingrid, thank you for taking me up on my offer. Please speak.
Always. I'm the quietest person in the room. Just coming back from a center visit, I'm doing dual roles. I'm quality manager, but I'm also supporting a QIS. So with that, again, the natural conversations of business practices, I just ask those natural questions in regards to systems that the owner operator was implementing. And I really am excited because by nature I'm a researcher and I just love the idea of again linking these tools to these conversations. So as my agency is taking on shared services, I can really see the benefit as we're developing those strong relationships and helping them to balance pedagogy as well as, of course, a well-run program. So I really am looking forward to implementing these resources.
Thank you so much. What a way to close out, Joanna. People are needing to pop to their next meetings. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I encourage you, thank you for joining us. I encourage you to sign up for the next one. Ingrid, there's going to be a lot of information around how we use our coaching guides to support those milestones. So please sign up. We'll get more in depth into this framework. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, your participation, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.